In the village of Ojo's Hollow, deep within the heart of the African forest, there lived a boy named Kwame. The sun always seemed to be angry when it beat down on the dry earth. The soil cracked like the broken promises of his past. At the tender age of 7, Kwame lost the two people who had once been his entire world: his parents. His father Kofi, a respected hunter, and his mother Amma, a woman known for her wisdom and kindness, had been at the heart of the village's spiritual guidance. Their deaths were sudden, violent, and inexplicable. The village spoke in hushed tones about it. Some claimed it was a curse, others whispered of betrayal, but the truth was much darker, and only Kwame knew the true cause. The night of the tragedy, a storm raged through the land, as if the heavens themselves wept. It was during this storm that his parents had gone to the river to fetch water, a journey they had made countless times before. They never returned. Kwame had waited at the doorway, his small hands pressed against the cold wood, hoping for their familiar laughter. But that night, only silence filled the air. The next morning, Kwame found the bodies of his parents washed up on the riverbank, their lifeless eyes staring at the sky. The villagers believed it to be an accident, a mishap of the storm. But Kwame felt something gnawing deep within his chest. His uncle, Obinna, had been there that night. He had been the last one to see them before they left for the river. But Obinna, his father's brother, had offered no condolences. He had been strangely indifferent, and it troubled Kwame's young heart. Yet there was no proof, no words that could expose the truth. The suspicion remained a heavy weight on his shoulders, one he would carry for many years. After the death of his parents, Kwame was sent to live with his uncle Obinna, a man who was as tall as a tree but whose heart seemed to lack warmth. His uncle lived in a small hut with his wife Adama, whose beauty was matched only by her cruelty. The moment Kwame stepped foot into their home, he realized he was not welcome. Adama, though outwardly kind to the village, had no love for the orphan boy. She saw him as a burden, a constant reminder of the wealth she believed should belong to her. Obinna, too, seemed less and less like the man who once called him a nephew. The way he avoided his gaze and the dismissive tone in his voice left Kwame feeling like a ghost in his own home. Every day his uncle would remind him that he was lucky to have a roof over his head, even though that roof came at the cost of constant labor. Kwame was forced to work the fields and tend to the animals, often working from dawn until dusk with little rest. His uncle's words were always sharp and harsh, and his aunt's cruelty was veiled in subtle ways. She would make him fetch water from the farthest well, even when his hands trembled from exhaustion. She would give him the scraps of food, leaving him hungry and weak, while she and Obinna ate their fill. At night, she would find new ways to torment him. Sometimes she would lock him out of the hut, forcing him to sleep on the cold, hard ground. Other nights, she would drag him by the hair and berate him for imagined offenses. Yet through it all, Kwame held on to a flicker of hope. His parents had taught him to be resilient, to survive in the face of adversity. But there was a deeper pain that he could not ignore, the feeling that his uncle knew more than he let on about his parents' death. As the years passed, Kwame grew into a young man, hardened by the constant abuse, but still determined to uncover the truth. His suspicions about his uncle's role in his parents' death only grew stronger. He began to notice strange things: Obinna's nervous glances when anyone mentioned the river or the night of the storm. He had also noticed that Obinna seemed to be handling a large sum of money that he could not explain. Rumors of secret dealings began to circulate among the villagers, and the village elder, Baba Nia, often spoke in riddles about the shadows that walk amongst us. One day when the harvest was complete, Kwame decided to confront his uncle. He had overheard a conversation between Obinna and Adama, in which they spoke of a deal that had been struck many years ago, a deal that had involved his parents. It was a conversation he would never forget. "Do you think he suspects anything?" Adama asked, her voice cold and malicious. Obinna's reply was even colder. "He's just a boy, a weak boy. What does he know? He will never understand." Kwame's heart pounded as he eavesdropped from the shadows, realizing that his uncle was speaking about him. They were talking about him like he was nothing more than a nuisance, a piece of property. The next day, as Obinna and Adama slept, Kwame snuck into his uncle's hut. He searched through Obinna's things and found a hidden chest beneath the floorboards. Inside, he found documents, letters, and a pouch of gold coins, all things that didn't belong to him. His heart nearly stopped when he found a letter written in his father's hand, dated just days before his parents' death. The letter spoke of a dangerous man Obinna had become involved with, a man who had promised wealth in exchange for a terrible price. Kwame's mind reeled as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. His uncle had sold out his parents to this dangerous man, and it had cost them their lives. Obinna had betrayed his own blood for wealth, and now he would pay. Kwame confronted his uncle that very night. His heart raced as he stood before Obinna, the man who had raised him, yet betrayed him. "You killed them," Kwame whispered, his voice trembling with anger and pain. "You sold my parents to the devil." Obinna's face remained unreadable for a moment, but then a twisted smile curled upon his lips. "They were weak, boy. They couldn't see the bigger picture. You'll understand one day." But Kwame wasn't afraid anymore. The boy who had been broken and battered for years had risen from the ashes of his suffering. He took the letter, the evidence of Obinna's betrayal, and set it aflame in front of him. "I'll expose you. The village will know what you've done." In that moment, something in Obinna snapped. He lunged at Kwame, knocking the letter from his hands. But Kwame fought back, using every ounce of strength he had gained over the years, every lesson in survival his parents had taught him. As the fight escalated, it was clear that the end had come for Obinna. The truth would no longer be buried. In a final act of defiance, Kwame dragged his uncle to the village elders, revealing the dark secrets he had kept hidden for so long. With Obinna's betrayal exposed, Kwame was freed from the oppressive shadow of his uncle. The village, shocked by the revelation, turned their backs on Obinna and Adama. The wealth they had stolen from his parents was returned to the rightful owners, and Kwame, now a young man with strength and wisdom beyond his years, was free to rebuild his life. Kwame left Ojo's Hollow, his heart heavy with the memories of the past, but his spirit unbroken. He ventured to distant lands where he worked with his hands, learned new trades, and built his fortune. His reputation as a man of integrity and resilience spread far and wide. Years later, Kwame returned to Ojo's Hollow, not as the orphan boy who had once been broken, but as a prosperous man who had triumphed over adversity. He built a school in his parents' honor, teaching the children of the village the values of courage, honesty, and strength. But Kwame never forgot the pain that had shaped him. He knew that he had become the man he was not by forgetting his past, but by using it to fuel his future. And when he stood before the village, he made sure the truth of his parents' death would never be forgotten, for in the pain of his loss, he had found his power. The shadows that had haunted his childhood were finally gone, and the orphan had become the hero of his own story.